Welcome to the Great Dad Life Podcast, episode number 2. I'm your host, Kyle Warner. Today, we're going to be talking about ways to build your resume for free in order to open up other options down the road. It is really for anyone looking to advance their career without breaking the bank, and even pertinent to college and high school students that may just be working part-time. Here to discuss is my good friend, Evan Greco. What's going on, buddy?
How's it going, man? It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Yeah, for sure. Evan, in addition to being a good friend of mine, is a district manager. He manages 7 going on 9 stores. We met and worked together in the Army, deployed together, and now he's the father of 3 kids. So, Evan, go ahead and fill in some of the gaps that I missed and give everybody just a quick bio.
Sure. So just real quick bio on myself. Grew up in New Jersey. Went to, all my schooling up until college was all done in New Jersey in the Atlantic City area. Then I went to college in Arlington, Virginia at Marymount University, graduated from there, went into the Army through officer candidate school, and then was in the Army altogether about 3.5 years. Was fortunate to be able to get out and go into retail, we'll call it for this interview. Got into retail, started as an operations manager, went into a general manager role for that same company, and now I'm in a district manager role as well. I was initially a district manager for the Northeast, covered New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and now I'm a district manager based out of Pensacola, and now I manage South Mississippi, South Alabama, and West Florida. That's where I'm at now.
Yeah, and in addition to all of those things, you're probably the best storyteller I've ever met in my whole life. So just wanted to throw that out there. Well, just a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover 3 main topics. The first one's going to be, what do we mean by building your resume? And what does that look like? Number 2 would be Evan's story, going from being a new college grad to being a military officer to jumping into corporate America. And then number 3 are some other ways to easily build your resume with maybe a smaller commitment than joining the military, for 3 to 4 years or whatnot. So, let's kick it off. When we talk about what is a resume and why is it important, Evan, what's your take on the whole thing? What is a resume and why is it important to continue to build it?
So your resume really, especially for someone just getting out of school, your resume is everything. Okay, your resume is going to be what gets your foot in the door to a hiring process in an organization. Okay, and it's really going to tell your story that you have whenever you're looking for a new job, or even if you're looking for advancement in your own career that you're already in. And that's why it's so important to continuously be building that. It's a shame. I feel like there's this just this thought process, that you have to go to an Ivy League school, okay, and then you have to advance your career. Let's say it's through getting your master's or something along those lines. Okay, you have to get that higher education, okay, in order to secure a good job and get a good life for you and your family. And that is just not the case, as you and I have seen. Okay, I'd say we took the road less traveled and ended up exactly where we wanted to be, okay, without having to follow that, cookie cutter route that you're led to believe is what you have to do in order to be successful.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for the audience, I was a criminology and law major, and you, sir, were a criminal justice major in college, right? Before our time in the military. So, but I would agree with you. It's a resume is basically your ticket to ride. It's how you qualify for the next job, and in some of these larger companies, when you send a resume in, there are automated filters looking for keywords or key experiences. So even without somebody looking at those things, maybe your resume gets thrown out if you don't have the right stuff on it. Sometimes the folks that are reviewing resumes are not the folks that you would be working for. They're not the hiring manager. They're HR folks, right? And they're looking for keywords or key things in your background that would quote unquote qualify you for the role, right? So for this episode, when we say resume, we're talking about bridging the gap between what you're doing and what you want to do. Is that fair?
That is fair.
Okay. Good stuff. All right, Evan, let's jump into your story, man. I think it's a great one. Take us back to, I think, what was it, 2011, 2012, right after graduating?
Yeah. So that I think this piece is so critical, especially for you and I, because we had the odds stacked against us. Okay, we graduated in 2011, and so, 2008 to 2012, really the worst years you could have graduated. Okay, because of the financial crisis. So not only did we graduate right in the middle of that time, but we also graduated as criminal justice majors, which I could not think of a more useless. I know there's a couple out there that may be more obscure or more acute rather. But yeah, we just did not pick the right degree, that's for sure. Okay, so the fact that we're both doing so well now, just I guess at this point, 9 years later, and that's really the story I want to tell you is you don't have to follow what we had initially talked about in order to still get success. Okay, and so graduated in 2011 and really had no idea what I was going to do. I had this idea I wanted to go into federal law enforcement. Okay, just I think that's what anyone who goes to school for criminal justice wants to do.
Yeah.
And the problem is, not only did you have the financial crisis going on in 2011, but that was the same year we pulled out of Iraq. So I wanted to go into federal law enforcement, had no job experience, okay, just had this college degree. And the market was just completely flooded with soldiers who would come back from Iraq and they get veterans preference. So I couldn't even land an interview anywhere. Fortunately, I had a hookup in the Secret Service, so I was able to get in that hiring process. But ultimately, I got all the way through. They were only taking a class of 50 people, and they told me, they were like, Evan, you did really well through the hiring process, but at the end of the day, we can only pick 50 people. We have guys with Bronze Stars and trigger time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you're just a fresh college student. Okay, and so we're going to go with them. And I was just devastated. Okay. It was really, there was no plan B. Okay. That was plan A, and that was the only plan. And so that's when I made up my mind I was going to go into the military. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to become a vet and get that veterans preference. And this will be my way into federal law enforcement. Okay. Lo and behold, after I got into the Army, I had no interest in going into law enforcement. After I started learning a lot about business and, couldn't wait to get into corporate America after that.
So for those who don't know what veterans preference is, could you explain how that point system works? Just really high level.
Yeah. So when you're looking at government jobs, obviously with the military being part of the federal government, okay, they want to take care of their veterans who have served. And so if you have, there's different levels of veterans preference. I want to say the absolute highest one is a disabled vet who's deployed. Then you have veterans who have just deployed, okay, to a combat zone. And then I think the third tier is just any veteran who's been in for X amount of time.
Okay.
And so they get put right at the top of the hiring process whenever a new federal position opens up.
So all things being equal, between you and someone with veterans preference, they get that leg up due to their background.
Exactly. And I even got, so when I was applying to jobs back in 11 and 12, I even got emails that just told me right from the get that my resume had already been reviewed and that unfortunately I wouldn't get an email because they had enough veterans to fill even the initial batch of people they were going to be interviewing.
Jeez, that's pretty wild. Well, it sounds like you went in with the intent of getting out after your contract was up to get back into law enforcement.
That was the plan.
Okay.
Initially, yeah.
It's super interesting, right? Because, becoming a military officer does open up so many doors that you're not even aware that it can open up down the road. Not just on the officer side, but also on the warrant side and the NCO side as well. And it's funny, I was talking to another friend of mine on an episode prior to this, and he was talking about getting into real estate. And he's like, I didn't know all the ins and outs, but I knew that initially taking that step and getting into real estate was going to lead to good things. Did you have a similar inkling when you signed that contract?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know why I wanted to go into law enforcement. A lot of my hobbies were, I guess, all tailored to the idea that I would ultimately go into law enforcement. My mom was involved in federal law enforcement. And so just dealing with her after everything with 9/11 until the time I graduated, I just thought that was the path I was going to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was in the military, I did not realize how many doors it opened up. I mean, you look at more than 40 of your presidents, all were ex-military, most of them being officers. And I didn't really see until I became an officer just how many doors it opened. But once it did, man, I hate to say it, but I just had no interest in going into law enforcement at that time. I don't know why I was pigeonholed for law enforcement, getting out of school, their college degrees.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it just opens up so many doors. It really does.
And life changes too, right? I mean, I went in with the intention of, hey, I'm going to be a military officer for my entire career, but things get complicated when, you get married or have kids or whatever, right? Like things change. So it is pretty great that many doors open up. But just to set the stage for folks too, I mean, when you left for basic training, your daughter was 2 months old. 2 months old. Yeah, that's tough. So did you initially, when you signed the contract, did you see this as something that you were going to have to go through? You're going to kind of have to suck it up, work hard, and then you're going to come out of the other end being better able to provide for your daughter? And
that is exactly how I saw it. So I went in with the idea that I was going to get out as soon as my initial contract was up. And that was really the beauty behind it. Since I knew that was the case, I went in through officer candidate school. And because you're going in through OCS and the military isn't having to pay for your college, it's an even shorter commitment. So if you go through, if I'm not mistaken, maybe you can correct me here, it's been a little bit, but if you go through one of the academies, I think you have a 5-year commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you go through ROTC, it's a 4-year commitment. And then OCS is only a 3-year commitment. So it was really the quickest way in and out for me to become a military officer and then get back out into whatever field I wanted to do in a relatively short amount of time, less than you would, a 4-year degree.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so initially going to basic and OCS, I'm sure it was really tough, balancing your responsibilities, being a new dad and working on the things that were going to make you successful in the Army at the time. I mean, how did you balance some of those things? I mean, was it, hey, my career needs my focus right now, and that's what I need to focus on? Or what was your mindset going through that?
It's funny you ask. So I would say I didn't balance it. That's how I was able to make it work. So fortunately, I had a wife who was very supportive and understood what the plan was. Okay, we didn't have exactly where I'd end up. Okay, but we knew that I just really needed to focus on my career for the next 3 years in order to open up all these different avenues. But man, that initial year was brutal, for me and my wife and my daughter, because went to basic training, which was about 2 months or so, then went to OCS, which was 3 months and change, and then went to basic officer leadership course, which was 6 months. And, going from Georgia to Oklahoma, had 2 weeks off for the holidays. And then as soon as I got to Fort deployed after 2 months, I mean, in the first 2 years of my time in the military, I really only saw my family 4 months during that whole time. That was it.
Let that sink in. Yeah. And you do have a funny story. I don't know if you'd be willing to tell it about a late night when you were an XO and you came home and Haley greeted you. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Remind me which one you're talking about. They were that could have been so many as an executive officer. So I'm trying to remember one story in particular.
Well, for folks who aren't aware, I mean, so, obviously Evan walked through, his first few years leading up through the deployment, and then got back and then became an executive officer, one of the most demanding roles at any level, right? You're working constantly, you're working long hours. You're involved in every decision made. The story that I'm referring to is you got home after a late night, maybe it was 7 or 8 at night.
Oh, I already know what you're talking about.
Okay, you'd probably tell it better than I would.
Yeah, so I came home one night. I mean, that job was just so demanding. I mean, what do you think we were normally working the course of a day? 12 hours was about your standard work day.
Yeah, that was a normal day.
Yeah, and I just came home and all I wanted to do was just relax. Okay, it was such a brutal day, and I remember I got home and my daughter just wanted to play. Like the moment I got home, and I was like, "Haley, please, okay, just give me a little bit, okay, give me like half hour or an hour or so just to relax." And she was like, "Why did you even come home? Like, why don't you just go back to work?" And like I totally got it from her being 2 or 3 years old. That I mean, she was right. Like in mindset, why even come home if I wasn't going to be able to play with her?
Yeah, no doubt, man. I mean, that just goes to show you how tough it was on the family as well, right? I mean, definitely a tough family life day to day. But so you get through these 3 years, right? Of being a military officer, you've gained a lot of experience, and then all of a sudden, one of the doors that opens up is there are specific programs that take talented junior military officers. So normally we're talking lieutenants and captains, right? And they will hook you up with corporate recruiters who have open roles, right? So I think the one that you used was Cameron Brooks.
I did, yeah.
Okay. So basically you outsource the search for your new career to these folks as well, which is pretty outstanding.
Yes. Okay. And so what's really, I had no idea until we had a couple of buddies who exited the military and they also went into corporate America. I had no idea the demand for junior military officers, your lieutenants and captains that existed. And it made total sense. And this is really the first big piece to the building your resume is by us going into the Army, you are afforded leadership opportunities that would take you years to get to if you just started in a civilian career. And so the perfect way to illustrate that is, so we graduated during a rough time, okay, like we already talked about. And so by the age of 25, where most of my contemporaries when I was in college, they got out and they were like maybe entering a like first time managerial position, let's say a project manager of maybe a team of four. And that's a big if. Like I'd say a lot of my friends, it probably took till 26, 27 to enter their first leadership role like that. You and I were in Afghanistan leading a whole platoon, of 30 soldiers in a really austere environment. Okay. And assigned for, in my particular case, $65 million worth of equipment that I was responsible for. So where they were at in, let's say, their leadership development, okay, I was so far beyond that. And we were, 25 years old. And so it was really impressive. And so what's interesting, and this is one of the things that company, Cameron Brooks, I was with, was at, is they show you that it takes about 8 years for your experiences to level out. So me in the military and then my civilian counterpart at year 8, after you've graduated college, that's really where your careers have just about caught up to each other. But anytime before year 8 as a military officer, you are just so far beyond your counterparts who just went to the civilian world. And then, once you're post command, so let's say you just wrapped up command, you were in charge of 100 soldiers. That's really where you get to the point of diminishing returns. Because by the time you're going to get a chance for battalion command, your peers may have already surpassed you who stayed in their civilian careers. So really, as soon as you're done command, or in my particular case, where it got done XO time and platoon leader time, that was the time to strike, really, to make my entrance into corporate America.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. You don't think about it that way on your way in, right?
No,
but
no.
but on the other end, it makes all the sense in the world. And my daughter's just 2.5 now, but I'm trying to think about the advice that I would give her, about what type of work to go into and what to really value in a role. And the one thing that's never going to not be in demand is leadership. And as a military officer, there's just so many opportunities to practice every day, whether it's you're running ranges, PT, field problems, inventories, long range planning. Your soldiers have some admin issues or whatnot. I mean, there's just so many opportunities to practice that you get very competent very quickly. Hence that demand, right? Folks can teach you the business, but if you bring that leadership ability, I mean, that's really a value to them.
Yep, I'm telling you, you're spot on. And so that leadership, I knew when I got out of the military, I wanted to continue the leadership piece. And what's interesting is getting into retail like I did, not only could I continue the leadership trajectory I was on, but really I could accelerate it.
Yep.
So, when you're a platoon leader, you have about 30 soldiers. And then when you're a company commander, you have 100. And then when you get to battalion command, you're, what would you say?
400 plus.
400.
Yeah.
So what I did the platoon leader piece. And then I was able to leave the military after that. Yeah, I was an XO who covered down for his company commander a few times. So I, managed about 100 people. And then where I would have had to wait until, what do you think? Like if I was booking it in the military, how long do you think what year do you think I could go into battalion command?
Geez, I mean, halfway through the second decade.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking like year 12, I'd be able to enter battalion command.
Yeah.
So what I did, instead of waiting until year 12, okay, so I left the military at year 4 after I would have gotten out of college. Then I joined the company I'm with now, okay, and got into retail. Started about the same area from a leadership perspective, okay, and then I became a general manager. So I was leading a team of 60 people in that case, and then became a district manager by my second year out of the Army. So now we're at year 6 being out of college, and I was already in a battalion equivalent role, managing 350 people. I have another 2 locations opening up this year. So you're going to look at all in probably about 450, 470 people. And so at this point in time, now I'm at year 9 out of college and still well ahead of time, okay, that I'd have to wait in the military to reach that same leadership equivalent.
It's truly amazing. I don't know if you've read Matt Best's book. So Matt Best, for those who don't know, he's one of the co-founders of Article 15 Clothing. I might get this wrong, but one of the co-founders of Black Rifle Coffee Company, among many others, right? He's got a very big social media presence. And he wrote a book called Thank You for My Service. And he was in the Ranger Regiment, did some contract work. But basically, if you read the whole book, he talks about how a lot of folks thank him for the things that he did. But in reality, he talks about how his experiences in the military, including the network that he gained through his time in the service, are really responsible for all the other good things that happened in his life, which is, pretty outstanding. I mean, I can definitely relate. Like I've gained much more than I gave for sure.
Oh, without question. Now, look, I haven't read that book, but it sounds like it's very pertinent to the topic that we're discussing here. I never would have had this opportunity, at least as quickly as I did without the military service. There's no question about it. Had I just gone into retail, now I could have gotten to where I'm at now. But I mean, we're talking about a significantly longer timeline. Where it took me 2 years to become a district manager, it probably would have taken me 5 if I just started right from ground. And I mean, like, that's really like top-notch performance the whole time. Okay. And doing the proper networking, okay, in order to get where I needed to be. But yeah, I mean, the fact that I was able to come in and in such a short amount of time be able to take that much responsibility, all due to my military service. No question about it.
Last topic on the military service. Let's talk a little bit about the network that you gain by being in the military, not just on the officer side, but just being in the military in general. I mean, what's your take on it?
Yeah, it's a really impressive network for sure. I mean, first off, I just made such good friends while I was in the Army. I stay in touch with quite a few of you guys, I really do. But also, even going into corporate America now, it's crazy that I can just meet someone who, let's say, was a artillery captain or an infantry lieutenant, you just immediately, I don't know, there's just like this bond you guys immediately have. You just met each other. It's really, really cool to see. And not only that, I've recruited a bunch of the people who I was in the military with to come in work for me in the company I'm with. So it's just the gift that keeps on giving. It really is.
I couldn't agree more. My initial role out of the Army, when I got out, was because of my network. So initially I was working with 2 other companies, and I went to some of those conferences for junior military officers, and I was following up with some folks, but my resume was out there on LinkedIn, and I got an email one day, and the subject line was just my old ROTC motto, always warriors. So I'm like, I got to open this up. And it was a person who's a veteran who went through my same ROTC program. I think might have graduated 4 years prior to me. But basically, he was definitely my foot in the door for that initial role coming off of active duty, and I didn't go to the same location that he was located in, but he really expedited everything else for me, put me in contact with the right people that led to an offer in that first role off of active duty. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good stuff. I mean, are there any other lessons learned that you'd like to leave folks with before we jump into some of these other ways to build your resume for free?
So just on that topic, I don't think there is more. If you're willing and you're able to go into the military after college, I could not recommend it enough. I really couldn't. Like when it comes to building your resume, there is no more bang for your buck that you could get than being a military officer. Yeah, okay. Obviously, there's a lot of important degrees or certifications that definitely help you out on there, but nothing is going to give you that scope of responsibility at such a young age. There's just nothing else like it.
I agree with you. I think being a JMO is definitely a great career builder. But I think you and I can both agree that we've seen a lot of people, not just on the officer side, but also on the enlisted side, that definitely wasted a lot of the time that they had where they could have gotten involved in things that had leadership opportunities or whatnot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And just one of the things to run into, and for anyone who's watching, we're not trying to say that being enlisted is in any way going to negatively impact your career, but being an officer, I mean, you're just thrown into such key leadership roles so early on. So let's say you just enlisted. How much time do you think would lapse from your time of enlistment to the time that you would be a platoon sergeant? In your opinion, Kyle, how much time do you think it would take to get to that?
I think the fastest you could do it officially and hit E7 is 7 years. 7 and 7, I think, would be a fast track.
Yeah, right along those same lines. And so I think we've been pretty conservative with our timeline. So the quickest it would take you if you enlisted would be 7 years into a platoon leader role. What we said about battalion command, like you really booking it 12 years, and so just going through the routes that we talked about, or whether it be ROTC or OCS, you just get into the military so quickly and into a key leadership role and then out before you have to start worrying about those diminishing returns. Okay. And, had you enlisted, okay, and then gone and got your college degree, yeah, okay, it's still beneficial. I'll tell you what, being enlisted and deploying and then going into a college atmosphere, I mean, you can bring so much more to the classroom from an experience standpoint than I ever could have, just going right from high school into college. But you just don't have that same, that leadership trajectory we were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. It's such a delayed time frame that you're dealing with before you can get to that scope of responsibility.
Yeah, no doubt. And before we move on and talk about some other ways to build your resume for free, I just wanted to go back to some of these companies that search for these roles specifically for JMOs, because I think this is something that I had no visibility on when I first entered into active duty. But it was huge for me and for you, like coming out, right? Because what these companies do, and there's Cameron Brooks, Lucas Group,
Alliance.
Bradley Morris. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's quite a few of them and a few smaller ones. And what they do, and the specifics of their process might vary a little bit, but they partner with corporate partners that have open roles that they want to bring junior military officers into, right? And as a junior military officer, if you create an account, they give you all these free resources. It's like a reading list, different types of resumes, and how to translate your experience into like a civilian sounding resume, interview questions, and answers. Am I missing anything?
No, no. And so I'm glad you brought that back up. I definitely want to circle around to it. I don't want to downplay the significance that Cameron Brooks played in me getting into the career that I'm in now. So I knew I wanted to leave the military. Okay. And I knew I had a pretty good resume built up at this point in time, but I had no idea what I wanted to go into as far as career path went. And I also didn't have any of the network I needed. Yeah, I had a great network inside the Army, but I didn't have anything in corporate America. Okay, especially with most of my family and friends were all in the federal government, which I had zero interest going into. So, I mean, I really, this was completely uncharted territory for me. And so I got in with Cameron Brooks. I was really fortunate. There's a lot of different military recruiters out there. And like someone like Bradley Morris, okay, they're really good, but they're all things to all people. Okay, so whether you're a brand new enlisted, senior enlisted, you're retiring from the military, you're a military officer, they handle everyone, and so it can be very difficult for them to be great in one particular area, where Cameron Brooks is only junior military officers. Okay, so it's only lieutenants and captains. So that was good. Okay. And they only place about 300 officers a year. And so I was very fortunate to be able to get in with them. And so since they deal with such a small amount of officers, how their program works is they like to get you a year to a year and a half out before you leave the military. I was on a much more accelerated timeline. I only got in with them like 6 months before I left, but they put you through, it's really like an accelerated MBA program is what they put you through. They have a lot of different modules for you to work on too, in order to determine what your interests are, what it is you want to do in corporate America. And then I had a ton of face-to-face. I mean, I probably met face-to-face 4 to 5 times in that 6-month time period, just so we could work on the interview prep, building your resume. And then the main thing that they provide you is they have the whole network, okay, of organizations who they've been working with. I think Cameron Brooks has been working with Johnson & Johnson for 40 years, just to illustrate how deep some of their connections run. But the big difference is if I were just to get out of the military and then try and find a job on my own, I'd really be going through a recruiter. Whereas Cameron Brooks, after I did my initial career conference with them, they set me up with 13 interviews with 13 different organizations. And then from there, did 4 follow-up interviews. In 3 out of those 4 follow-up interviews, I got to meet the CEO firsthand. Okay, like there's no way I could have secured that kind of audience, okay, just on my own, unless like I really had some good connections in that organization. But just through Cameron Brooks, how high profile it is, getting one of their candidates, I mean, you couldn't even pay to get that kind of exposure going into a new company.
Well, the efficiencies there too. So when you talk about doing interviews, right, for folks who are not familiar, or maybe for newer junior military officers, what these companies do, and it's completely free to you, the way they make their money is they get a certain percentage of your first year's salary when you accept, or if you accept a role, right? So there's no cost to you. You get all these resources, and then they'll have a hiring conference. So you'll go there with other junior military officers, and there's different conference rooms that each company has, right? And they might have 1 open position, they might have 5 open positions, but it's cost beneficial for you because you can go meet with 8 to 15 different folks, hiring managers or whatnot. And it's obviously the cost beneficial for them for the same reason, right? They can meet so many different candidates. And then you do your follow-up from there based on feedback that you get, and if they're willing to fly you out or whatnot. But it's just a very efficient program.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a win for everyone involved. So it's a win for the applicant because I mean I got to interview with Fortune 500 companies, so I got to do 13 interviews in 2 days. And so just getting to deal with Fortune 500 companies, okay, companies that have, like the one I'm with now that's been around for 58 years, or $30 billion, like just very impressive list of companies you get to interview with. Then it's a win for the companies themselves because while I did 13 interviews in those 2 days, I mean, I think they can do up to 16 interviews in those 2 days of just top-notch applicants to have. So really good hiring pool. And then it's obviously a win for Cameron Brooks, okay, because they're getting a percentage of that first year pay that we get in an organization. So I mean, and it's even a win for the hotel, okay, because they run out that entire hotel for all the companies. I mean, anyone involved in this thing is coming out and on the better end for it.
Yeah, and that cut doesn't come out of your paycheck, right? So just to clear that up for everybody.
It's from the organization. It's the finder's fee, so to speak.
Yep.
That they're paying for us to already be vetted through the placement firm.
Yep. Well, good stuff, man. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk to the folks that don't want to make that big of a commitment or don't want to make that specific commitment. What are some of the smaller ways that they can really start building their resume to prepare for the next level role within their current role, even if they're part-time?
So that's a great question. Okay. Because I know not everyone is going to have, is either going to be able to join the military, that they may not have the family situation where they can leave their family, for an extended for 20 months, like I did in a 2-year period. I completely get that just isn't going to work for everybody. And what's interesting now is being in retail, I can tell you that I think that is a great starting platform for someone. Well, one of the things you and I have talked about before, like we had talked about, is people think they have to get like an Ivy League education or get even further their education, through grad school or getting their JD or their doctorate. And one of the things I was actually just reading about is the average Ivy Leaguer is making $114,000 by the time they're 34. So when they're 12 years removed from college, and man, I'm going to tell you, you can easily make double that. Okay, if you were to go into retail, and by your 12-year mark, you can easily double that. Okay, and I can tell you, most people in my position don't even have a college degree. So I mean, you can get a 4-year head start on anyone who is. And what's interesting about retail is very similar to the Army. If you want increased responsibility, you got it. They have no problem giving it to you. Okay, it's a very difficult industry to operate in, but man, I'm telling you, they will give you as much to bite off as you want. Okay, that you think you can handle. It's very similar in that aspect, but. Yeah, I think it's a really great starting platform, and there's nowhere you can go wrong in a customer service industry. Okay, that is applicable to anything you'll do. Just like we talked about with leadership always being in high demand, customer service is the same thing. It really is. Yep. And I mean, that's one thing that it just can't be outsourced. And so I'm telling you, I think that's, I would highly recommend, now that I've been in this field, that if there's someone who's not sure what they want to do, but I mean, they're willing to work hard, willing to travel, okay, and just have an agility to learning, that, man, you can really do well for yourself in retail, and you don't have to take any of the steps I did. Yeah, obviously, it would greatly accelerate your ability to get your upward mobility, but man, you could. You honestly could start in the same line of work that I did, just coming right out of high school, and probably be where I'm at. Okay, now that I'm 9 years removed, you could probably do it.
Yeah, I think the mobility is a great piece that not a lot of people talk about. I mean, if you are mobile, you're willing to move for different roles as they open up, you're going to skyrocket compared to someone that says, no, this is where I'm going to stay for my entire career. Because at that point, you're at the mercy of other folks leaving or getting promoted, right?
Yes. And that's another reason why I was able to advance so quickly in the company I got into, is because I was willing to relocate. So I relocated initially out of the military, and then I relocated again to get my first district manager role. And I'm telling you, the only reason I even had that chance is because no one wanted to go up to the Northeast in this particular case. And I mean, that's where I was from originally. And so the fact that I was willing to move so quickly, I mean, that probably advanced me about 6 months sooner than the timeline was for me, just because I was the one guy who was able to do it right then and there. And then able to move again for where I'm at now. See, I probably moved 3 times in 4 years now for my company, but those are the things you have to be willing to do if you want to be able to get that. Just what we talked about, such quick timelines to be able to move into levels of advanced responsibility.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Well, what else from your end? So there's agility. I think that's a huge one. What else is going to get someone to where they want to go a little faster?
Look, there's no two ways around it. Okay, just the hard work element too. Okay, so I'm a big work smarter, not harder kind of guy.
Yep.
But I mean, there's no replacement for the hard work piece. Okay, coming into the military, that's one thing that didn't change a lot. Okay, going from the military to retail is, I mean, it's about the same amount of time that I was spending there. You have to be willing to, the common misconception that Gen Xers have about us being millennials is just like, we're not willing to work, show up on time. Okay. Now, I mean, there may be some validity to that statistically, but I think that's where you and I have kind of separated ourselves from the rest of the pack, because we have no problem, putting in the hours in order to be successful.
Yeah. You got to invest the time, right?
Oh yeah. So investing the time up front, being able to move like we had talked about, being able to network that is crucial. Okay. Yep. It really is. And I'm trying to think, just being a lifelong learner. You can't ever feel like you've reached this level where you know everything that there is to know about whatever role you're currently in. Okay, whether it was us when we were in the military, whether it was me being an operations manager or general manager or district manager, you just always have to be learning.
Yeah, I completely agree, man. And it's funny, as I was preparing for this interview, I knew that you and I were going to bring 2 different perspectives here, and I think they're in line. But I did a talk not too long ago at my old high school. I had a teacher that asked me to come in, and I've told you this story, so this is more for the rest of the audience, right? But he said, talk about whatever you think is important. I think at that point I was 9 or 10 years removed. I thought I had done some pretty cool things in my short time following high school. And so I went in talking about how to build your resume for free. That was the topic. That's why I was so excited to bring this idea to you too. So I go through my spiel. I go through, I graduated ROTC, got to do some cool things, jump out of airplanes at airborne school or whatnot, got deployed, went into corporate America. And, they asked if there were any questions at the end, and there was silence for a few seconds. And then one of the guys goes, "How much you deadlift?"
that was the big takeaway from the presentation.
And I'm like, man, this topic is absolutely needed if that's the feedback I get from a high school senior. But some of the key points that I made during that presentation was, one, get some keywords on your resume. There's really no certification or degree necessary to have experience doing something outside of your key function, right? So even I think back to when I worked at a restaurant in high school, if you can get some experience understanding inventory, maybe that's an additional role for you. Maybe you don't make additional money doing it, but if you seek out the opportunity to learn inventory or margin in a business like retail, you're going to be head and shoulders above the other folks. I mean, right or wrong.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I would say, and it's so funny because like I never had any of this. So I'm glad you got to experience it when you were in high school. But you know, I was fortunate. I had a family who was like, look, you just focus on school. Okay, don't worry about getting a job. Like we can cover your gas and stuff like that. Okay, until you
Mhm.
graduate. So, man, when I came out, I had no actual work experience at all. And so, had I been able to work in a organization, work in a company during even my time in high school, where even getting that customer service, getting like
Yeah.
basic inventory
Yep.
functions, from a managerial standpoint, scheduling,
Mhm.
any kind of HR, any kind of HR functions. So hiring, firing, raises, okay, stuff like that. Understanding labor to percent of sales.
Yep.
Um, what other kinds of things could you have? Could you get? Oh, anything related to profit and loss. Okay,
Yep.
so actually getting your name on a P&L. That's huge. I remember I had interviewed with another company after I had started with the one I'm with now. And I mean, the first question they asked with me being in a managerial role was, what was my annual operating profit for the business that it was like the first thing on there. So yeah, I'm telling you that piece is key, and you don't even have to, get into a district manager role like I am now, or go through the military in order to start gaining those kind of things you can have on your resume. Outside of the leadership piece.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. And for anyone who's not familiar, P&L is a profit and loss statement, right? So it's a statement that shows where the money's coming in the business and where the money's leaving. It shows all of your expenses and whatnot. And if you can understand that and speak to it, I mean, and if you can own part of it, that's even bigger to your point, right, Evan? But no, all good stuff. And I think about when I left the military, right? So, or even going into the military, right? I started as a criminology and law studies major and got the opportunity to work in air defense in the Army as you did, right? On radars and some pretty high tech stuff, right? Which is really cool. But looking back at my background, I wasn't necessarily qualified to do that, but the Army trained me up, right? And then going from that role to corporate America, I was able to slide into a process improvement position, usually set aside for someone with an engineering background due to the leadership I gained from the previous role, right? And then after that, during that role, I got the chance to go to some Lean Six Sigma training, right? And I got to put that on my resume, which qualified me for the next position.
That's huge.
So, I mean, and I just think it's kind of cool when I stop and think about how I made myself qualified for the next role, without going out and spending my own money to get new certifications or whatnot.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is I would say my last 6 months. So as soon as I partnered with
Mhm.
Cameron Brooks, it was 6 months before I left. And it was such an interesting time because now I knew that, 180 days from there, I would be interviewing with organizations. And they gave me 26 questions. It was 26 interview questions that you could very easily change the word on them, and it's a totally another question. So these 26 really span the whole gamut of questions you would encounter in an interview. And there were some that I just didn't have answers to yet. So over that next 6 months, I either volunteered for things
Yeah.
or did projects in which I knew I could develop an answer for this exact question. Like I was like the man in the battalion for so many things because I knew there were certain experiences I was trying to gain before I left that time there, just so I knew that I'd have a really good answer during the interview process.
That's such a great point, and that goes back to what we were talking about not wasting the time that you're given, and even in your current
Exactly.
role. There's so many opportunities to get on a Lean Six Sigma team or a TPM team or some type of project team, right? And that's really what, when I'm hiring someone, that's what I want to hear about. Certifications are all great, but I want to hear about the experience. I want to hear about how you implemented it or what the team did or whatnot. So any that's another piece of advice is any opportunity to jump on a team like that and gain some experience is going to be huge.
Exactly. And as many things I know can be difficult getting outside of your comfort zone, but the more experiences you get, I mean, it just makes you such a well-rounded applicant. The more things that you can have on your resume that just cover uh, various responsibilities outside of what just would fall into your typical duties, it just makes you that much more appealing to a hiring manager. It really does, and get those key phrases that we were talking about that
Yep.
would get you through the hiring process, in order to get that next step.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the last one I had is ask yourself, what does my boss care about? What does my boss's boss care about? Right? And you'd be shocked at how easy it is to get that answer. Just ask them.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like if you understand those two things, and I think that goes back to our military days, right? Understanding the higher mission, 2 levels above your own, is critical in understanding your role in the organization or in the mission or whatnot. So, what's your take on that?
I mean, I live by the mantra: if it's important to my boss, it's important to me.
Yep.
Okay, all about that, and exactly what you said. You mentioned a very important piece there: 2 levels up. So I can tell you now, as a district manager, I report to my direct supervisor is the division manager, and then he reports to the vice president. Okay, so knowing what the 2 of them are focused on, which you can be in some organizations where the company is like very in tune with what the goals are for the organization that year and everyone works towards that. Or you can be in an organization, or you just have a certain chain of command where the VP's focused on X, the division manager is focused on Y, and then it's very important you're focused on probably both those things, okay, in the role I'm at, because I want to please both my supervisor, okay, and my senior rater, to put it in Army terms.
Yep. And I don't think it matters what level you're at, right? I mean, your
Oh, yeah.
boss will.
That goes for any level. Okay,
Yep.
even if you were a cashier,
Yep.
if I was a cashier somewhere, I'd want to make sure that I know what my shift leader deems important, okay, and then what my general manager is focused on. You just want to make sure that you're pleasing all those in your chain.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, that's all I had on my list. Did you have any other key takeaways?
But no, I'm telling
No.
you, I just love that's why I was so happy when you asked me to talk about this topic, because especially when you're in college, there's so much you don't know. What I wouldn't give to be able to talk to my college. I don't even know if I would have went to college, honestly, what I know about corporate America.
Right.
But just the experiences that you gain, and just the constantly focused on building your resume. That piece is huge. And I feel like so many people, they just get into like a dead end job, or they get into what's comfortable, and that's kind of it, where the whole name of the game for me when I left the military was upward mobility. It was like the sole thing I was focused on when I was interviewing with companies. And to me, that's what it's all about. There were a couple of jobs that I looked at that I think I could have done well for myself, a couple of corporate sales jobs, but there wasn't anything above that, where I was looking for the company who wasn't just looking at me to fill an immediate need, but the company who was like, I could see this guy, filling the next 2 or 3 positions from here. That's what I was looking for.
That long-term perspective is key, right? And I mean, even if you are, again, working at a restaurant, you're in high school or whatnot, I mean, just understanding that it's not just about the dollars, right? One of the hangups that I see is, well, I'm not going to take this additional duty because I don't get paid more for it, right? It's not about the dollars. Yeah. Think about, okay, maybe you don't get paid extra for it hourly, but you are adding to your resume, right? You are working on that long-term approach, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I see that mentality in so many people. I really do, where they're like, no, I'm not going to do any additional work, okay, unless I'm getting paid for it. But there is so much that goes along with that. So one of the things over this last year that I've done, in addition to my job now, and for no additional pay, is, I worked on the company's first college internship program. Okay, they've never had a structured internship program for college students. So I helped work on that, and I was the mentor for college students. I'm on the company's district manager forum. So it's like a think tank of district managers, just of various things we can work on to either fix efficiency issues or communication with corporate or rolling out new projects. Did that. I initiated an emerging leader program for my division. Okay. And so these were all like very time consuming endeavors to get into, but they increased my networking in the organization. Okay. And some of these were really high vis programs. Okay. So it gave me more exposure. Yeah, I wasn't making any more money, but it gave me more exposure to key players in the organization. Okay, it let me increase my network of peers because I was working with a lot of different district managers outside of my division for these projects. Okay, and then also something as simple as at the end of the year, okay, I knew, and this is what we talk about with the long-term perspective, I knew there's an evaluation question, okay, for my big annual eval with my divisional and my VP of what did you do to better the organization? And for any of my peers who were just DMs, I mean, they didn't really do anything. Yeah, they made the company some more money as a district manager, but they didn't do anything outside of that. They did, where I could say helping out the college interns, working on the emerging leaders, all the different projects I worked on the DM forum. Okay, and I mean, that's all those experiences. Okay, and being able to have that on my resume worth so much more than just asking for a raise or just denying it because I wasn't getting any additional pay for it.
Yeah. Awesome. Good stuff, man. Well, we covered a ton today. I really appreciate you being here. If anyone has any questions for you or whatnot, or would like to reach out, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So I would say best way would just be to send me an email. Okay, my personal email is evan, EVAN, .greco, GRECO 59 @gmail.com. But that would probably be the easiest way. And I'm always willing to help out.
Good stuff. Well, thanks again for your time, my friend. I appreciate it.
No problem. It was good getting to see you again.
Yeah, you too.